The best use of money is often to put yourself in a position where your effort can take you the rest of the way. It will never take you all the way, but it can help put you in a position where your effort can take you the rest of the way.
Welcome to Retirement Revealed. I'm your host, Jeremy Keil, and we're here to turn your retirement savings into retirement income. Today, we're talking with Dr. Daniel Crosby about money and meaning. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Jeremy, good to be back.
Yes, it is back because 2 years ago, you were on the show talking about the biggest risk to your retirement, and I had a theory that one of the biggest risks to your retirement is yourself. So you walked us through some of the behavioral finance reasons why sometimes we're getting in the way of our own self-interest. Although interesting enough, sometimes economists and us numbers folks think your self-interest is different than you do. And I think you know more about your money than some academic or financial advisor. So it was interesting kind of learning some of the behavioral finance part of it. But you're coming back with a new book called The Soul of Wealth. Tell me a little bit more about the Soul of Wealth and how that became a project.
Well, The Soul of Wealth is a book on money and meaning, and it's unlike any book I've ever written before in a couple of ways. First of all, it's geared towards everyone. You know, mom and pop investors can read this. That can't be said of some of my previous work. And then the other thing is the format itself. The format is 50 brief chapters, 50 short essays of about 5 pages apiece that touch on some facet of money, mindset, and meaning. And it was such a joy to write. Every chapter has sort of a historical vignette and then goes into the research and application. So much fun to write it in that format.
Yeah, I can imagine. Maybe I'm gonna, of course, writing any book is not easy, but perhaps easier to do. I've got a thought. Let me really dive in and make it great for about 4 or 5 pages, as opposed to maybe let me have this entire 12 chapter book focused on one particular idea. As I'm a quick start in the Colby Index and have a lot of ideas. I can appreciate the ideas of, hey, let me just get this great thought, get it on paper, and get it out into the world.
Yeah, that's right. It sort of requires you to be parsimonious in your writing as well, right? You have to sort of pick the best ideas rather than trying to make them expand to sort of fit a traditional chapter. Well, which is, I think, the tendency for chapters that are 25 pages long. Let me take one thought and kind of draw it out as long as I can. My task here was let me have one point and try and prove it as concisely as I can. It's a very different animal.
Yes, for sure. I've been reading the book. I'm about 3/4 of the way done. I got to the office this morning. I thought, where's my copy of the book? Oh, yes, it's on my nightstand because I was reading it last night. So far, my summary, tell me how you feel about this, is my summary about your book is it'll help you create more meaning for your money, and it'll help you create more meaning from your money. Does that sound like a good summary so far?
I'll be stealing that and not attributing you.
You should.
That's
All
the
right.
new tagline.
Okay, I will take you. I will be your muse. I'll get this out there in the public as soon as possible, so people can learn that they heard it here first. Awesome, cool. Well, you're a psychologist, but you're actually more like a public speaker than someone that has a private practice. How did that come about?
So I am indeed a psychologist. My PhD is in clinical psychology, but about 3/4 of the way through that, I started to burn out. I was getting real. I was very young, at least young to be giving life advice to people. I was 23 when I started counseling, and so at the point when I was burning out, I was like 26, 27. And 40 hours a week of people unloading their heaviest, their worst days and their heaviest life concerns on you. It's important work, but it's weighty work for someone that age. And I started to burn out, and I came to my dad, who's a financial advisor, and I said, hey, I love thinking about why people do the things that they do, but I'm not sure that I love it in this context. Can you help me brainstorm some different applications of psychology? And my dad, who's an advisor, said, well, there's a ton of psychology in my work. And that really surprised me. I had always sort of thought of my dad as sort of a, one part stock picker, one part sales guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it just wasn't what I was expecting him to say. And long story short, that put me on a journey to explore how much emotion there really is in money and seeing money and markets as sort of the perfect backdrop against which to talk about all these things.
Yeah, it's nice you had your dad there to provide some counsel. You didn't really have to totally jettison the psychology thing. I imagine you're maybe getting more meaning out of the psychology training, talking to others. It's almost like you're a psychology evangelist in the money field.
Yeah, it's right. And I get to learn everything I ever used, but just in a different context. And I think there's a real lesson in there for college grads. I've talked to many college grads about sort of taking the building blocks or the fundaments of what you learned in college and applying it in a new direction. I think is a powerful concept.
Yeah, it's a concept that some people don't quite get. They think, okay, I have to go and study this one thing, and that's the only one thing I can do with the rest of my life. Of course, maybe I'm a little bit biased. I'm a physics major, and I'm in the world of financial planning, and here you are, a psychologist in the world of financial planning. So
Mhm.
we're certainly applying. I'm applying my research and data science in a way to financial planning. Now, I'm curious too, because you said your dad's a financial advisor. I'm a financial advisor. I'm a dad. I've got kids. What do you remember about your dad being a financial advisor growing up? And maybe what should I be trying to impart on my children? I'll get some free advice from you.
So I have a couple of things I remember. I first of all, I remember talking about stocks around the dinner table and sort of having this understanding at a very young age that, owning a stock was fractional ownership in a business and that your money could work for you. And as someone who is, congenitally lazy, that was really that was really appealing to me. It's like, oh, I can take this money, put it over here, and the people who are working are then making me money. Like that's really awesome, so I think what my parents did well and what I've tried to recreate with my own three children is looking for those organic moments, like looking for those natural moments. Since money touches every part of our lives, how can we take a natural teaching moment and just inject a little truth about the world of finance into it? My dad's also very charitable. I think he's a good example of someone who thinks about wealth in a soulful way. He likes money. He makes good money. He helps other people maximize their money making potential, but then he's also very thoughtful about giving it away. And I talk about that a lot in the book. So someone who's concerned about money and thoughtful about money without being owned by money is a rare combination. So I feel lucky to have grown up in the home that I did.
Yeah, that's great. And the things you're saying there, I feel like I'm doing a bit of that. So I feel as if I'll give my confirmation bias. I feel like I'm doing it right.
Good.
You mentioned charity, and that was one thing. That's the first thing I want to ask you about. Is you talk about a study in the book where people gave away $5 and they got more joy or satisfaction from giving away $5 than actually spending $20 on themselves. And I'm an economic kind of guy, right? Money is fungible, so
Mhm.
shouldn't you get 4 times the joy out of spending on yourself versus the $5 you give away? How does that come about?
Yeah, it's a great question. This is one of the things that we really misapprehend about the ways that money will or won't make us happy. People very reliably think that spending money on themselves will bring them more joy than giving money away. And as you just cited quite nicely, that is not the case. And what's fascinating when I was putting the research together for the book is this is really a human thing. Like you see this in children as young as 2. This sort of warm glow of altruism in children as young as 2. But one condition has to be met for it to be sort of maximally effective. The research shows that it needs to be, they call it costly giving. It needs to cost you something, right? So a child gets more warm glow out of breaking their candy bar in half and giving half of it to a friend than having a candy bar and having their parents give them a second one that they then give to a friend,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it needs to hurt a little bit. And I think there's a lesson in there for a lot of us. I think maybe we give, when we give till it's comfortable. And I think, the lessons of the soul of wealth say, hey, maybe we need to give until we have to think twice about it, or maybe it even hurts a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's you walk into the grocery store. I just did this the other day. I walked in the grocery store. There's somebody they're selling the poppies, like it's
Hmm.
raising money for disabled veterans, and I gave each kid $1 because I'm like I want to impart some charity on them. So I guess I'm giving them the here's the habit that we do, but it didn't cost them $1, right? I didn't say here's $1 and you get to decide what to do with it. I said here's $1 and you go give it to charity there.
Hmm.
But at the same time, you do hear those things where just yesterday, my daughter brought some food to the basketball game because she wanted to share with her friends. Right? She
Hmm.
probably got a lot more joy out of that. Okay, I'm going to take what I have here and go share. So
Yeah.
that's useful for us, right? Giving $5 to charity is a nice experiment, but maybe for the higher income retirees that are probably listening right now, might not do much. But give it a shot, right? Give it a shot where maybe it's like you have to give it a second thought. Do I really want to write this check? But try it out once, I think is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think needing to stop and think about it is a good sort of heuristic, a good indicator that you're on the right path.
Mm-hmm. Another part of your book, the chapter itself is called "A hammer is useless when painting a room," which I've never seen that phrase, but it's absolutely right on it. It talks about what money is good for, what is money not good for. Can you share some of those things from each category? What money is good for, not good for?
Yeah, one of the I'm going to try and open the book up right now because I think there's a part I'd like to read, but there's one of the things that we get wrong about money is that there's a lot of half truths involved with money when it comes to the utility of money. So here we go. I was able to find it. So it says the belief that money is a tool that solves every problem is so hard to shake because it's riddled with half truths. Money can't buy us happiness outright, but it can buy us the absence of misery. Money can't buy us love, but it can buy us chocolate and roses. Money can't buy us purpose, but it can buy us time to reflect on the meaning of life. And so I think that's where, money as a tool gets misconstrued a lot. Because Gandhi has this quote which paraphrasing is, to the poor person bread is God, right? Because if you have no money, you're not thinking about love and relationships and purpose and meaning. You're thinking about your next meal or that next paycheck. But having enough money to secure that next meal and that warm place to sleep doesn't guarantee you love or purpose or self-actualization either. So the best use of money, I talk about a few examples in that chapter, personal growth, education, things like that. The best use of money is often to put yourself in a position where your effort can take you the rest of the way. It will never take you all the way, but it can help put you in a position where your effort can take you the rest of the way.
It's great. You do have a flow. I said these are 50 different chapters, but I can tell there's a flow in it. And one part of the chapters is just talking about how money can kind of sort of buy happiness sometimes, right? And so if we're trying to use money for good for us, usually it's I want to become happy. I want my kids to be happy. I want to be happy with what it is. Tell me a bit about this. Money can kind of sort of buy happiness sometimes.
Yeah, so there's a few different studies on this that have found some really interesting things. There was one study that was very popular. It was $75,000 at the time. It would now be about 100 adjusted for inflation. But the study found that people who made, call it $100,000 in today's money, up to $100,000, they were much happier with every incremental dollar. And then it really flatlined pretty hard. Like north of $100,000, happiness sort of flatlined. But there's no blood test for money, or excuse me, for happiness. And so what they're doing is they had these pagers that they would text these people or page these people a couple of times a day and just sort of say, hey, 1 to 10, how are you doing? And on this sort of very rudimentary measure of happiness, they found that happiness rose up into the right to 100,000 and then flatlined. Well, really, what money was doing was buying then the absence of misery, because when you make $100,000 a year, you have enough to eat, you sleep in a warm bed, you have health insurance when you get a toothache, sort of on and on. You're able to, you can fix the roof when it's leaking on you. Like you can sort of take care of the basic necessities of life. But other studies have found that, in fact, some people do have more happiness. When we measure it a little more qualitatively and subjectively, people can buy happiness north of 100,000 if they spend it right. So here's a couple of the things they found. One is giving it away. We talked about that a bit already. Another thing was buying your time back. And part of what this looks like is getting out of work you hate. So, paying the high school kid to mow your yard, paying the cleaning folks to clean your house. If there's something, paying an accountant to do your taxes. If there's something you really, really don't like, paying someone to do something that you hate and giving yourself back some of your life is a really fantastic use of money. The other thing the research shows is that sort of funding relationships is a positive thing. If you look at people who buy cars, typically the bump in happiness is very short lived. You buy a new car and then very quickly it's just your car, right? I mean, it's just sort of how you go get your groceries and how you get to the gym. And it's just not sort of nothing special, even if it's quite a nice car. But they find that people who buy a car to join a car club actually experience a lot of enduring happiness. Because if you join, the Ferrari Club of North Atlanta, then you've got a place to go on Saturday. You've got buddies to rev your engine with and drink coffee with and, talk about the glory days with. So anything we can do to sort of foster relational depth, whether that's sort of entree to a club or going on a vacation with people we love, all of that stuff that deepens relationships is a really sound way to spend money.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And of course, too, you think of how you spend your money, but a lot of times it's not how you spend the money. It's maybe how other people are spending the money that kind of gets to you. One of your chapters is titled "The Comparison is the Thief of Joy." I think we get that, but if you could expand a little bit on there of how this comparison tendency is just really hurting our own money actions or maybe our feelings about ourselves.
Yeah. So I like I said, for each of the 50 chapters, I give historical examples, and I really like the one that I used there. It was fascinating for me to learn about. It was Vincent Van Gogh. Victor Hugo's in another chapter. Vincent Van Gogh. Vincent Van Gogh, and talking about the time when he cut off his ear, right? And so we know this about him, and he's this sort of troubled artistic genius. And the reason he did it, as best we can surmise, is because he lived in constant comparison to his friend, sort of a frenemy slash fellow painter, Paul Gauguin. And Van Gogh was not commercially successful in his lifetime. We only know for sure of one painting that he sold. It is hypothesized that he sold as many as five, but definitely not more than five. So this guy sells between one and five paintings. He's living largely off the generosity of his brother, who's sort of hooking him up and is his benefactor. And he writes hundreds of letters to his brother, sort of obsessing about this other artist, Gauguin's talent. And eventually, when he cuts off his ear and then eventually ends his own life, it is largely driven by this tendency to compare. Wealth is a subjective consideration, right? I mean, especially above a certain threshold, who's wealthy and who's not is really in the eye of the beholder. And my favorite stat from this chapter looks at financial contentment. So this idea, like, are you at peace with your level of wealth? And there are two things that are predictive of financial contentment, two, and they're equally predictive. The first one is as obvious as it can be. How much money do you have? So, all else equal, yes, people with more money are more contented than people with less money. But there's this second factor, which is just as predictive as the actual dollars in your bank account. And it's, who are you comparing yourself to? And they call this, the fancy shrink term for this is your reference class. Who are you comparing yourself to? Who are you benchmarking to? And it turns out that the people you are benchmarking to have a material impact on how you feel about your wealth. And so if you compare yourself, to the richest person or the richest person in the world, right? Because we all live in a world. A couple hundred years ago, you would have lived in a little village, you would have known 100 people, and your available reference classes would have been fairly limited. We now live in a world where, through social media and the news and other things, we can compare ourselves to literally any person on earth, including the wealthiest people on earth and the most successful people on earth. And if we're always doing this, it is a recipe for sadness and failure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see especially this comparison on there where just before school started, my kids had to have the latest water bottles. That was like the hot thing going into the school year, and it was a huge problem the day before because the person with 4 million YouTube views a month had this water bottle, but here we are not having this water bottle, and so it's interesting. Of course, we're talking about teenagers here, so it's we don't want to just say it's only the kids, but it's ourselves, right? You become an adult, and I think one of the biggest factors of your own financial success is not just who you marry. That's important too, but where you live. It's a combination of, when you choose where you live, you're making your biggest monthly commitment, which is a huge impact on your budget. But you're choosing your reference point. So my general advice to anyone that's in their 20s is, when you're going to look for a house, tell your realtor and your mortgage person you make 20% less than you do. Right? You make 100,000. Tell your realtor, tell your mortgage person, I make 80,000 a year. Because then they'll try to get you to stretch beyond that, right? But at least they're stretching beyond something that you can easily handle, of having 20% less than you do. So it'll probably help you out financially. But now you're in a neighborhood where you're at the top of the income level, and you're feeling good about yourself, right? And you're going to be more content because you just chose your financial reference. That's my advice. Give me some thoughts there.
That's great advice. It's one of the biggest mistakes that I've ever personally made financially, was moving from a relatively modest home and neighborhood, nice but squarely middle class, into a more flashy neighborhood. And even though I could afford it, like, I mean, even though it was within well within my ability to pay the mortgage, I just didn't need it. And it put me in a new reference class.
Mm-hmm.
I went from benchmarking myself to like solidly middle class folks to, just professional athletes and stuff who are my neighbors now. And I'm not in their league. And so it's a very different ball game, and it makes you feel small, and it's frustrating. And it's, you can, objectively, I'm doing better than I was then, right? By
Mm-hmm.
any objective financial measure. And yet it feels like I'm not. And that's where this concept of wealth is so tricky. And the yardstick we're using to measure it becomes so important.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of importance, and also the actual name of Victor, you mentioned a Victor in your book, but your chapter, I think my favorite chapter is "Your Money Needs a Why," and you're talking specifically about Viktor Frankl. And the quote you put in there is, "He who has a why to live can bear with almost any how." Tell me a bit about Viktor Frankl in general, in case someone hasn't heard of him, but really this idea of the why behind your money.
Yeah, so Viktor Frankl was a Jewish psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz and a number of other prison camps. And his sort of groundbreaking observation, and the basis for his brand of therapy called logotherapy, was this idea, the quote that you just shared, that he cribbed from Nietzsche, which is, he or she who has a why to live can bear with almost any how. And he found that, in the Nazi prison camps, that, the people who were able to overcome the worst of what has effectively ever been thrown at humanity were the people who had a bigger purpose, something that they were looking forward to, something that they were um, dreaming of outside of the prison camps. And it's incredible, like the same idea of purpose that saw him through some of the darkest days that the human family has ever witnessed can actually help us with our very average financial lives. I quote I quote studies from Morningstar in that chapter that show that people who label their accounts, label it Jeremy's retire to the Bahamas fund instead of just, fund ABC 123. That simple act, the people with labeled accounts tend to have 15% higher account balances than those without. Also, I quote a study in there that showed that in a bad market, people were 10 times less likely to liquidate their accounts because if you liquidate that Jeremy retires to the Bahamas fund, it's like that dream is gone, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
giving up on a dream instead of giving up on ABC 123, which is a very different thing. And then finally, people are dramatically more likely to save for retirement if those accounts are labeled. So I'm all about personalization, visualization, and meaning. How can we name those dollars? How can we earmark those dollars for a specific path and a specific purpose? It makes the journey more enjoyable, and it brings about a host of really positive behaviors.
Yeah, I've seen studies too where they're trying to get maybe lower income populations to save more, and they thought maybe instead of giving away interest, we'll give away like a lottery ticket. And so if you wouldn't made a deposit, it's like you got a raffle ticket on there, and that worked okay. And then they just said, wait a second, what if we take their kid's picture and just the first thing you see when you go into the account is the picture of your kid, right? So if you're trying to do more, I love this idea that you're having about visualization and adding meaning, that your results are going to do better with it. You'll hear the tagline later on where I say that if you learn more about your money, you will feel better about your money. You'll make better money decisions. But apparently, if you have more meaning behind your money, you'll make better money decisions. I think that's what we're learning from you today.
Yeah, it's true. And you don't even, I mean, learning's wonderful, but you don't even have to learn anything. Like, right. It's
Right.
just, it's natural. It's just a byproduct of our human desire to work towards something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah. So I guess everyone, you can go ahead and subscribe to Retirement Revealed, to subscribe to Mr. Retirement YouTube channel. But maybe you don't have to listen anymore if you put a picture of your favorite kid or your favorite vacation spot in the name of your accounts instead. Well, I've got one more question for you, Daniel. Before we get to that, tell us a little bit what's the best way to reach out to you?
So I'm at Daniel Crosby on Twitter and Daniel Crosby PhD on LinkedIn.
Yep, and we'll have links to your all your books, but especially the latest book, Soul of Wealth. Love books. That's how I get introduced to a lot of guests. So I appreciate you writing the books. And the first three people, I love to give away books. So the first three people who email me, podcast at KeilFP, podcast at KeilFP.com, I will send you a free copy of Dr. Daniel Crosby's book, The Soul of Wealth.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. Well, the final question I have for you, Daniel, is tell us something about yourself that few people know about. And remember, this podcast is rated clean.
So, now I got to remember, what did I put? What did I say the first time?
We'll find out. Let's see how consistent or what's new in your life in the last 2 years.
Okay. So, I speak Tagalog. I speak Filipino,
Okay.
which is not something every Irish kid from Alabama gets to learn. But I lived in Manila for a couple of years, and I speak Filipino. And every summer, my family and I go to Southern California, which is where the largest population of Filipinos in the country is. And we go there partially for the weather, of course, because it's a lot better than Georgia. But we go there for the perfect weather, and also we attend a Filipino language church and eat delicious Filipino food and hang out with all of our friends all summer. So that's my one weird fact. That is clean.
Yeah, I love it. Yep. Okay. Well, I'm guessing if you're going to the Filipino church, most of your ideas are, your stories are also clean, right?
There you go.
Yeah, good. Well, appreciate you coming on, sharing with us about how to put more meaning into your money and grab more meaning from your money as well. Thanks for coming on the show, Daniel.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
Absolutely. And thank you for listening to the Retirement Revealed podcast. We believe if you know more about your money, you will feel better about your money and you will make better money decisions. Hi, I'm Jeremy Keil, owner of Keil Financial Partners. And if you're interested in seeing how we help our clients get more income, pay less in taxes, and avoid big retirement mistakes, make sure to go to keilfp.com. That's KEILFP.com.